Hi everyone, I'm back with a fourth chemical combat devlog, but before I start, I'm glad to announce that the game will be launching in early access on Steam on the 12th of September, so if you haven't already, wishlisting the game helps out a ton. For the 10,000 of you that only care about Arbonir, that sadly doesn't mean I'll be returning to it just yet, but I'll explain more about that at the end of the video. If you're new here, I'm Peter, a 16-year-old game developer who has been working on a chemistry-themed roguelike since the start of January. I've spent the past 2 months preparing for release by adding 4 new dungeon variants, each with a variety of unique enemies, as well as puzzle rooms, a main menu with settings and a choice of difficulties, and much more. And what better way to start the video than with some pixel art? Over a week's worth of it to be precise. See, I had originally planned out 4 distinct floors themed around monsters, magic, robots and hell respectively. Each of these was going to have 4 unique enemies, but I first needed to set the mood by making the floors themselves. Although the tiles were mostly just recolors, I had to draw what felt like 1,000 pieces of furniture for each of them. Some of these are even animated and have particles in game, and overall, things look much better now. With that out of the way though, I could then move on to my favourite task, animating living things. In all seriousness though, once I got into the swing of it, they weren't all that bad to draw, so now I just needed to make them actually do something. I'm not sure if you noticed, but previously the enemies were the most boring things in existence. They literally just walk towards you, usually hitting you around 40% of the time unless you hid behind literally anything. Since I needed 16 enemies, I wanted to make a system that was fairly modular, so I ended up splitting the behaviours into 3 parts: targeting, movement, and attacking. Targeting modules decide where the enemy should move to, movement ones decide the manner in which they should do so, and attacking ones control what they do when they reach their destination. In the simplest case, the targeting would simply return the position of the player, the movement would tell it to walk in a straight line towards them, and the attacking module would hit the player directly on contact. But for some enemies there can be multiple different modes which are switched between based on distance and so on, so it wasn't the easiest to get set up, but I am very glad that I did so, as the game feels a lot better now. Unfortunately though, this productive streak was interrupted by a holiday, and when I returned, I realised, oh shit, I need to release the game in less than 2 months and it's still missing half the basic features. So after that realisation, I decided to focus primarily on UI, starting with a death screen, because despite how well I present the game in the devlogs, there was actually no way of dying. As I wanted to continue with the nicely themed interfaces, I decided that a clipboard with a kind of lab report would suit the game quite well, so then it was on to the main menu. Sadly, I was a bit out of inspiration by this point, but after studying a few examples online, I settled on this, which isn't anything special, but it does the job. Now it was time to make the buttons do something. Well, actually only 2 of them, but anyway. For the options menu, I pretty much just adapted the system from the Arbonir demo, changing the style to a large whiteboard with handwritten diagrams and stuff. And then since I didn't like the play button just playing the game, I decided it would be more interesting to show a fancy command line interface style animation for selecting the difficulty. Now, last time I released something, there were quite a few people complaining about the lack of audio, so this time I've remedied that issue. I spent a few days cooking up a fire soundtrack, which I've uploaded to my new second channel, SigmoidDev, just to keep things separate. After doing so, I downloaded a bunch of sound effects and regrettably even made some of them myself. So that was the unfinished game crisis averted, but I was still missing most of the content that I had promised. Despite discussing a mining system for the past 2 episodes, I wasn't quite sure how to properly incorporate it, so it's not entirely functional yet. Instead of starting with all 16 elements though, you now only have the first 6 and can pay coins to unlock new ones after each floor. I do plan to change this at some point in the future, which is why some of the upgrades in the skill tree have been temporarily replaced. But either way, after receiving quite a bit of feedback on the last video about the whole thing, I'm thinking of reworking the upgrades again in a later update. Since doing this, I've spent all my remaining time finishing off the enemies, adding puzzle and loot rooms, testing the game and fixing bugs in a seemingly endless cycle, and much more. That has taken up pretty much my entire summer holidays, so once the game comes out, I will be taking a short break before working on more updates. The game will be slightly cheaper during early access, and I'll be having a further 20% sale for the first week, so do be sure to buy a copy and help shape the final product. My current plans are to continue working on the game for a few more months, adding in bosses, logbook entries, new floors and many more reactions among other things, but if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave a comment or join the Discord server. So that's it for the devlog, time to discuss the channel. I'm not entirely sure how long this will all take, but I expect Chemical Combat to be finished no later than mid-December, at which point I will not be returning to Arbanir immediately. I know it's been over a year since the last update, but unfortunately I've made hardly any progress due to this game taking over. I am, however, very glad that I embarked upon this journey, as it has given me plenty more experience and I now know what mistakes to avoid with Arbanir, so development should be much smoother. I will be taking a short break from game dev entirely to prevent burnout, during which I'd like to play through a few games for inspiration, work on a few personal projects and focus on improving my pixel art in a non-game dev context. I'll likely post a few shorter things here and may become more active on other platforms, but don't expect another Arbanir devlog for a long while. I know that might suck to hear, but my plan is to have a huge series of updates after that. If you're still here, thanks for watching, but that's it for now. See you next time.